At the farm school, you get to be yourself rather than what everyone else wants you to be.
You learn a lot of different stuff instead of math, science, reading, and all. You learn about nature.
Yeah, how to farm.
What I like about the place is a lot is you have a lot of freedom.
Well, here you can have a better relationship with the teachers.
Learning used to be seen as a product, something to acquire once and for all. Subjects like biology or algebra were taught as if they had distinct beginnings and endings. Today we must think of learning as a journey. We're all traveling, acquiring new skills, investigating process, not being so concerned with when the course is over, but with learning how to ask good questions, to pay attention to the right things, being open to new concepts. What's now known may change. These next few years will be crucial ones, not only for education, but for all of humanity. Kids need to be independent thinkers who are adequately informed.
Well, I want you to realize that when I talk about that 5 years in my book, Critical Path, I see it as a crisis for all humanity, and there's a possibility that humanity won't make it beyond the 5 years. If we do make it beyond the 5 years and do undertake a design revolution, really reusing the world's resources, not for weapons, melting up the weapons and so forth, and actually undertake to use the most advanced technology to house and accommodate humanity, we can have all humanity living in a completely new way, where no competition, there's ample to go around, so you don't have to earn your living. You do things that you find logical to do, where your children spontaneously do. So that what may happen is that your children, your oldest at 13, another 5 years, 18, if we go through this critical point, they'll be part of the young world that really is leading the new world, where much of the vision and drive will come from the very young people.
I have 8 to 10-year-olds in my morning meeting. It's a wonderful age group to deal with. It's a real heavy transition that they go through at this time. They see themselves differently. It's a hard time for them too, I think. You know, they're no longer, parents make different demands of kids at this age than they did, say they were 6 or 7 years old. When they're 6 or 7, every piece of artwork that came home was wonderful, marvelous, you know, that's terrific. When they're 8 years old, the demands are more linear. Every piece of artwork isn't terrific that they come home with. The parents are making more demands on them, and different kinds of demands, and the children are real unsure as to what's expected of them. I think being a child in the 1980s, from my perspective, is a real difficult thing. There are incredible amount of fears. Children are only too aware, even at this age, the 8 to 10-year-olds, of what's going on, what they hear every day on the news. I don't know if we can ever give kids the tools, or adults the tools, to deal with the kinds of things that they have to deal with in the 1980s.
You can use a number of vehicles to accomplish the purpose of promoting an environment that is a loving and caring environment, and a stimulating and exciting environment. And we've tried to do that within the context of the farm school. You can't teach someone self-intelligence, but you can create an environment wherein it can occur. And that's really what we've tried to do here in the way that we've structured the school, and the way that the children talk to us as people instead of as authorities. You know, the candor and dissent that are permitted in the classroom. the opening of questions and discussion of feelings and discussions that have to do with what some people think is unrelated school matter, but has very much to do with developing whole and happy human beings who can be fulfilled and whose creative potential can be realized.
Well, I think it's really important that, as educators and parents and anybody, that it's important to listen to children and to observe children, because they have the whole essence of how one should learn and can learn. They enjoy learning. Learning should be exciting. They're enthusiastic about it. This environment allows them to be themselves. It allows them to explore, to create, to be able to go out and climb a tree and achieve that skill where you wouldn't have it if you were in a self-contained classroom. It allows them to interact with one another. At times they feel like interacting without feeling under any great stress, because this is a certain time that they have to perform this way. It allows them to feel sad and cry and worry and gain support from that without disrupting groups of children. It allows a time for them to be alone. It allows a time for them to be with groups without having any kind of threat around that.
Children are interested in science just instinctively. It's the world around them. There are always questions about what's going on around them, because they're trying to find how they fit into the world in the first place. And you can't help but wonder about what's going on around you. How are you different from that? What is it doing out there? How does it relate to you?
One thing I was impressed with when I first was here, when the kids are having problems, there's no hesitation in coming to one of the teachers, as one called them teachers, the educators, I prefer to call them, here, and then the problem is sorted out, whereas so often in public schools, or when there are lots of kids being handled all at one time, it's a matter of you sit down, shut up and be quiet and listen, and everybody on the same level, as it were, whereas everybody has their own needs. And if kids can be helped in sorting out some of their difficulties, either with other kids or with a problem or whatnot, they become much more individual and much more capable of handling themselves, and become much more of an independent person, standing on his own 2 6-year-old feet with an adult, which you don't find in other places where it's mass education. But then a lot of them would like to do things that are too complicated for them. And this is where my theory is, well, okay, now you do the design yourself, because it's much better for them to do it themselves and figure out how they do it, or else do it to the extent that they have done it, even though it looks terrible or whatever. But it's theirs, entirely theirs, so that it's not something that I have put in front of them. All they have to do is stand and say, isn't it nice?
There is a striving for excellence. Here, the theater class provides a vehicle for a cooperative, creative activity that stresses long-term commitment to a project. It's a wonderful way to encourage the learning involved in playwriting, history, play reading, theater crafts, music, dance, and also basic self-confidence. Oh, there's an incredible magic that comes from seeing a tentative child reach inside and pull out a new feeling of self-worth.
Well, working by doing, or learning by doing, and I call it working sometimes too, because I think work comes along with it. Sometimes in a situation like the garden, for instance, that makes it more difficult to be working and keep children interested. But I think it's important for them to participate in the whole process so that they learn something about how to do it. Real simple thought, maybe too basic for some people, but it's in line with my thinking, is that you can't bother to read until you can eat. That may be reducing it to oversimplifying it, if you will. But I think it's really important to learn how to garden, to learn how to deal with these elements that provide food for us. And I take this into areas of building and so forth too. Using a hammer and nail is more important than reading in some ways too. I don't want to deny the importance of reading, and I enjoy that, and there's a lot of context here that I can teach reading in. Now, I can take this seed packet, something we're going to plant here, and I can say to one of these children here, you read this packet here, and then you'll know how to deal with these seeds. How deep should they be? How far apart should they be? And if this child is interested in gardening, this is a good source. This is a motivating factor. This is something that will ask them to learn, that they'll want to learn to read so they can cope with this kind of thing.
When people ask about Piaget, that Piaget is not a method of teaching or a style of teaching. Piaget was a man who was able to achieve something by putting some clarity into understanding the developmental stages of the growth of children. And it's really important to see that in math, and young children especially, that they have to relate not only to manipulative objects, but they have to relate to the environment, they have to relate to each other, they have to interact constantly in order to understand these concepts. Objects are important for children to interact with, especially during math-related kind of concepts, because they cannot deal with any kind of abstracts at this particular age level. They have a real hard time. With objects, colorful, objects, they can, in different sizes, different shapes, they can relate to, and it's concrete. It becomes concrete to them. They can see that numbers relate to one another with touch, and to just have an association with that. Be able to, you visually are looking at it, you're touching it, and all of those are coming into you as understanding that concept.
In other settings, you're limited to an indoor setting, to what materials you can bring within the school. In this setting, we can use materials that are within the school and equipment within the school, but we can move from here out and back in again. And that's what just happens naturally. They find things outside, children find things outside and bring them in to look at here, and we have equipment in here which they know how to use and enjoy using. And so it's a matter of taking their own interests as far as they want to take them, and they come up with their own questions, and they discover through those questions the answers. Again, my approach to teaching in science is not linear. It's more of a spreading type of thing, where a child gets an idea or has an interest and can move from there. I don't need to present a body of information and say that this is all the information there is. They can discover that information on their own.
I started teaching in 1933, and I taught country school for about 3 years, and then moved into consolidated schools and taught in elementary. And as I taught, I had a frustration, constant frustration, that I could not meet the children's needs. So I changed to special education. And after 40 years, I retired, 40-some years, and I missed the children, so this little school was near my home, and I applied, and I've been working here ever since. My first thoughts when I came to Upland Hills was, how can the children have such a good time and still learn to read and do math and the things that kids do in school? And I spent the whole first year saying to myself, well, how do they do it? They do it. They do learn to read, and they do learn to write, and they do learn to do all the things that regular kids do in a public school, but they do it in such a relaxed and happy atmosphere that it almost seems like they cannot be learning, but they're learning so much more. We have some children who have special needs. One of the youngsters was very hard of hearing, hears very little, and she needs special help. If you're sitting right by her, she can hear a little. And the other little boy is on such stringent diets that on certain days he's not able to learn well, and he needs special help. Of course, we all need special help. It's a matter of humans working together and doing things together that makes it more interesting. When I'm working with individual children, I work with them in breeding, teaching them skills that they may have missed. And I work with them in math, particularly children who need to get concepts. Working one-to-one, you can draw pictures or use Cuisenaire rods, for instance, and help them to get a concept of what they're doing, a feeling for it.
Well, I'm not sure where the word humanistic education comes from, but I think that Ashley Montague, who is a well-known anthropologist, talks about the value of education, and that education starts not with teachers, but it starts with parents, the mother and the father, and that they are the primary educators of kids. And it's a lifelong process where the teacher works in conjunction with the parents to try and create an environment for a loving, whole child. And the major emphasis of humanistic education is to produce a loving child, to create an environment where that child can know themselves, to give that child encouragement and support, to enable the child to understand the complex relationships, sensitive relationships between each other and between their environment and themselves.
Education is humanistic from the point of view that it's a total communication of you and the child, but not you telling the child or the person, doesn't matter, you know, whether they're a 50 or 80-year-old person, but particularly at the school here, it's not, hopefully it's not telling them this, that and the other, but it's creating a situation in which they will ask you, so that that sets a basis for a communication between yourselves. Now, it doesn't always work that way, but that's my ideal about as far as education is concerned, is that, like the old meaning of the word education is the drawing out of the person, of the knowledge, the drawing out. We can't learn anything that we don't know, it's there. And the humanistic education is that it becomes, to me anyways, it becomes drawn out because of your communication with the other person. And hopefully it will lead to a beautiful thing.
Individually, in terms of a humanistic educator, where I feel that I'm most humanistic, if you will, is just in the basic way that I relate to children. There are many ways that gardening could be taught. I don't think gardening has too much to do with that humanistic aspect. And I mean, there's more of an attitude, a life attitude that I want to teach gardening as, or maple syrup, or building, or whatever it might happen to be. And dealing with children, you have to be sensitive to their needs and their desires and what they need to help them as they develop. A sensitivity to how they're relating to other people, how they're getting along with you, how they're feeling that day is important too. And then to get them to sense how I'm feeling and relating to me and helping me out, cooperation, and all of those ideas go together. That's humanistic education in terms of Upland Hills Farm School for me, and I have to do that in the garden or out at Maple Syrup or over with the animals down by the barn or wherever I'm at lunchtime, before school, after school, playing baseball, whatever we might be doing.
When I came here and was exposed to this kind of environment, it was like an awareness that there was something always lacking before. You know, there was no connection. There wasn't a real connection. It was like a pattern. It was a mold. It was like, you do this way. You know, there was no attachment to what is me. How can I relate to this? You know, other people relate, but how can I relate to this? You know, and when I came here, it was like I had the freedom to be able to relate by learning through the kids. I learned that. I see that to relate to one another, to feel it's important to be you, not to have somebody design a curriculum for you that says this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. It's like, this is what I feel is important, this is me, and I'm going to show you my achievements. And my achievements might be not necessarily receiving an A or receiving a trophy. My achievements are like, look, you know, I lost my tooth. Oh, how wonderful you're able to do that. Or I can write my name. Or of course, I'm relating to younger children in these kinds of things, but also even in older children, when they can jump up and down and come to our building and have younger children relate to them. They gain a great deal of support from this whole environment, from all levels, from the younger ones to the older ones. And it's really important to see that if it was like they were able to make a friend, and that was a big worry or a doubt, in their minds before, that they came in and they were sharing that with you. And I noticed, I said, look at all the excitement and the enlightenment. What are they so excited about? And I'm trying to put it in my terminology, like, well, they're excited because this is the way it should be according to my experience. But they were excited because they were being themselves, and they wanted recognition for being themselves and that individual enlightenment. So, the first thing, the awareness was like, of course I have to applaud that. That's exciting, I will recognize that. And when you recognize that, then they understand, oh, there's a respect here. You saw me for me, and you applauded that. You recognize that. That's terrific. I feel real good. And then the relationship starts growing, and then the environment starts growing, the sensitivity, and then all things happen. And it's an astonishing feeling, but that's a humanistic approach, and it's so important because there's a lot of wonderful humanistic people out there. And to know that even if you have been in some kind of situation that you've had a mold around you, it's so important to know that you can come out of that. You can feel that attachment by just listening to just watching and listening to kids. They're the key to everything.
We're dealing in those who are going to really make the real breakthroughs to really demonstrating a new kind of life, assuming that there's plenty to go around, where you don't have to earn a living, don't have to be preoccupied with doing what the power structure wants to do, where you're preoccupied with what's the universe need to be done, what am I here for?
More than anything, what we're doing with children is promoting the experience of interrelated wholeness, the deep sense of unity, connection. Children know wholeness as implicate. When you express the idea that all people throughout the planet have a right to enough food and shelter and clothing, kids have no problem with that at all. They're in agreement. For years, schools have been teaching fragmentation, pieces, biology separate from English, separate from math, all distinct components, as if unrelated or unconnected. It's time now for humankind to devote our collective attention to wholeness. Our new insight being that everything is connected in ways that science alone cannot understand or predict. Through intuition, intelligence, and creativity, we can help children make explicate what they already know. Each of us has some very important gift to give to all of humanity.
I have often thought to myself at home, how could this be applied to the public school, for instance, or in other, to spread this idea so that many children could. It's really not quite fair, is it, that these 57 children get this kind of an experience. All children should have it.